The grand space station of Vera floated like a jewel in the endless black of the galaxy. It was a place built for peace, where leaders from many worlds came to meet, argue, and sometimes agree. Inside its shining halls, banners of dozens of species hung side by side, colors and symbols from every corner of the stars. Among all these leaders, none caught more attention than Princess Riala of Tevrin. She was tall, graceful, and dressed in silver robes that shimmered like starlight. Wherever she walked, her guards followed in silence, and people lowered their heads in respect. Many spoke of her beauty and wisdom, but what they noticed most was her distance. Riala rarely spoke to anyone. She listened with calm eyes but offered no smiles, no warmth, no casual words. She carried herself like a statue, perfect but untouchable, to her people. This was how a princess should be. To outsiders, it made her seem cold. Humans noticed this more than anyone else. The human delegation was small, only a handful of men and women among giants, lizard-like beings, and glowing insect races. Compared to the older powers of the galaxy, humanity was young and experienced, and sometimes looked down upon. But humans had something the others did not. They were loud, curious, and always trying to make friends. Daniel, a young human diplomat, felt this keenly. He was not the leader of the human group. He was simply an assistant, someone expected to take notes and stand quietly behind his elders. But Daniel's eyes wandered often, and his curiosity was stronger than his sense of rank. On the second day of the peace gathering, there was a great reception in the Hall of Stars. Long tables held foods from many worlds, crystal fruits from Alvarez, steaming root stews from the Kale system, and spiced drinks that glowed faintly in tall glasses. Music played from floating instruments that shaped sound into patterns of light. Leaders mingled, spoke in hushed voices, or laughed loudly depending on their culture. Yet Princess Riala stood apart. She sat near the balcony, her gaze fixed on the endless space beyond the glass wall. No one dared to disturb her. Even the boldest traders or curious envoys kept their distance. Daniel, standing with his fellow humans, noticed her isolation. Something about it struck him as strange. Here was someone so important, surrounded by people, yet entirely alone. His companions were too busy with serious talks to notice, but Daniel could not ignore it. He thought for a moment. Should he approach? It was dangerous, maybe even foolish. But the thought of letting the moment pass bothered him more than the risk. With a quiet breath, Daniel stepped away from his group and walked toward the balcony. He could feel eyes turning to him. A human approaching the Tevrin princess was not a common sight. Her guards stiffened as he came closer, their hands resting on their weapons. Riala turned her head slightly, her expression calm and unreadable. Most people would have bowed or delivered some formal greeting, reciting long words of respect. Daniel did not. Instead, he smiled lightly and waved his hand as if greeting a friend. Then he said, in a playful and casual tone, "Hello, cute girl." The entire hall seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped. Glasses paused in midair. A ripple of shock ran through the guests. Did a human just speak to the Tevrin princess like that? Without titles, without ceremony, just simple, bold words. Riala herself blinked, surprised. No one had ever spoken to her like that. From the time she was a child, everyone addressed her as Princess, Your Grace, or Daughter of Tevrin. No one had dared to treat her as an ordinary young woman. For a moment, she did not know how to react. Her guards stepped forward, ready to remove the human if she gave the order. The leaders of other races watched closely, some waiting for his punishment, others curious about her response. But Riala did not call for his removal. She studied Daniel's face. He was not mocking her. His eyes were bright, friendly, almost innocent. There was no fear in him, only a strange warmth. Daniel stood calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. He did not bow, but he also did not show disrespect. His words had been light, even playful, but his manner was simple and honest. Something stirred inside Riala, a small crack in the wall she had built around herself. She did not smile, not yet, but she felt a faint shift in her heart. The silence in the hall stretched. Then, softly, Riala spoke her first casual words in years. "You are bold, human," she said, her voice calm but curious. Daniel grinned. "Maybe. But sometimes boldness makes a friend." The hall remained tense, but whispers began to spread. Some were shocked, others amused. A human had spoken to the distant princess as no one else ever had, and for the first time, she had answered not with formality, but with something close to interest. Far above the shining station, stars burned silently, unaware that a single playful greeting had just begun to change the course of interstellar history. The air in the great hall of Vare Station stayed tense long after Daniel spoke his bold words. Leaders from dozens of races still whispered among themselves. Glancing toward the human and the princess, no one knew whether they had just witnessed the beginning of a disaster or something entirely new. Princess Riala did not move at first. Her silver eyes lingered on Daniel, studying him carefully. She was used to empty praise, endless formal greetings, and words weighed down by duty. But this human had spoken with no fear, no layers of ceremony, just a playful greeting that cut through the silence. Her guards waited for her signal. One of them leaned close and whispered, "Princess, shall we remove him?" But Riala raised her hand lightly, stopping them. "No," she said. Her voice was steady, but inside, she felt a small curiosity she had not known in years. Daniel, unaware of how close he had come to being dragged out, tilted his head with a grin. "Well, that's better," he said cheerfully. "You actually said something to me. Most people would just glare until I went away." Some leaders gasped. Others chuckled softly. A few alien delegates shook their heads, whispering that humans were reckless. Yet more than one alien secretly admired the human's courage. Riala, however, did not answer him immediately. Instead, she stood, her silver robe flowing like water, and took a step closer. Her tall frame and calm dignity contrasted with Daniel's relaxed stance for a heartbeat, but to seem like opposites, royal distance and human warmth facing each other. "You speak strangely," Riala said at last. "You address me without title, without respect." Daniel shrugged lightly. "I thought respect is shown in action, not in long words. If I bow 100 times but never treat you kindly, does that mean I respect you? Or is it just performance?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever dared speak to her in such a way. Her life had been filled with rituals, endless greetings, and people bowing so low their heads nearly touched the ground. But rarely had anyone spoken from the heart. The hall remained silent, all ears fixed on their exchange. Riala finally said, "Perhaps you are bold because you are human. Your people are new to these councils. You do not understand the weight of tradition." "Maybe not," Daniel admitted easily, "but sometimes tradition makes walls. And if you build walls too high, no one ever reaches the person inside." This time, Riala's eyes softened slightly. His words were strange, yet they touched something she had long hidden. Behind all the titles and duties, she was still a young woman who often felt alone. Before she could answer, the sound of laughter broke the tension. It came from one of the alien envoys, a tall creature with skin like polished stone. He leaned back and said, "Humans are either very brave or very foolish. I cannot decide which." Daniel chuckled. "Why not both?" The hall erupted with mixed reactions. Some laughed, others frowned. But one thing was clear. The heavy silence had lifted. For the first time during the peace gathering, Princess Riala was at the center of attention, not for her untouchable grace, but for a conversation that felt almost human. Later that evening, after the reception ended, Riala returned to her private chamber. Her guards remained at the door, but inside, she stood alone. She touched the balcony rail, staring at the stars as she always did. Yet tonight her thoughts were not calm. The human's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes tradition makes walls. She had lived inside such walls her entire life. To her people, she was the symbol of Tevrin's pride, the untouchable princess. She was not supposed to laugh, or stumble, or speak without perfect dignity. She was to be admired, but never approached, and yet, when that human had called her cute girl, something inside her had cracked. It was not insult. Not mockery, it was simple, light-hearted. For a moment, she had felt like more than a title. Why did that matter so much? At the same time, Daniel sat with the human delegation. His companions scolded him in low voices. "Do you realize what you've done?" one asked sharply. "You could have offended an entire royal house, or started a diplomatic storm." Another added. Daniel raised his hands in defense. "I didn't mean anything bad. I just saw someone sitting alone. I thought maybe she needed a smile." The older diplomats shook their heads, but deep down, even they noticed something. The princess had not ordered his removal. She had answered him. For someone known as distant and untouchable, that was a change worth noting. That night, word of the human's boldness spread through the station. Stories twisted as they traveled. Some said the human insulted her, others claimed he charmed her. Whispers reached every corner. Perhaps humanity was not as weak and simple as many thought. Meanwhile, in her chamber, Riala stood still, her silver eyes reflecting the stars. She remembered the human's grin, his careless courage, and his words. About walls, slowly, almost without realizing it, she touched her lips as if testing the shape of a smile. For the first time in many years, the distant princess wondered what it might feel like to step outside her walls. The next morning, the Hall of Stars was once again filled with voices of leaders and envoys. Delegates discussed treaties, borders, and trade routes. But whispers about the human and the princess still floated in the air. Some spoke of it with laughter, others with concern, but no one forgot it. Princess Riala listened to the debates with her usual calm expression. To all who looked at her, she seemed the same as always, distant, perfect, untouchable. Yet behind her silver eyes, thoughts stirred. She remembered the human's grin, his playful greeting, and his simple question about walls. Her people had taught her that humans were unpredictable and careless, not to be trusted. But the young man had not seemed careless. He had seemed free. Free from the endless weight of titles, free to speak honestly. That freedom lingered in her mind like a spark that refused to fade. During a recess, Riala left the council hall and walked through one of the observation corridors of the station. From there, the stars shone bright, framed by glass walls. She often came here for quiet. But today her steps slowed when she noticed a group of humans gathered nearby. They were not speaking of politics. Instead, they were laughing together, sharing food from a small container, and teasing each other with light jokes. One woman pushed another gently, and they both laughed harder. Daniel was among them, telling some story with wide gestures that made the others grin. Riala paused in the shadows, unseen. She studied them silently. Most other species she knew carried themselves with strict discipline. Conversations were measured, formal, and often heavy with hidden meaning. But humans were different. They laughed loudly, spoke with open hands, and even argued with smiles. At first, she thought it strange to casual, to careless for such a serious gathering. But the longer she watched, the more she felt something she could not name. Their laughter carried no falsehood, no hidden agenda. It was simple, warm, and alive. She touched her chest lightly. For years, she had lived with perfect manners and endless restraint. Laughter was rare in her life, and when it came, it was always polite, never free. The human's joy stirred a quiet longing in her heart. Daniel noticed her before the others did. He glanced up mid-story and caught sight of her standing at the edge of the corridor. His grin widened, and he lifted a hand in a casual wave. Riala froze for a moment. No one waved at her like that. Most bowed, most lowered their heads. But Daniel's hand lifted as though greeting an old friend. She felt a strange pull inside herself, half temptation, half hesitation. She gave a small nod in return, the slightest movement, then turned and walked away before her guards could comment. That night, in her private chamber, she sat near the wide window and remembered what she had seen. The image of humans laughing together replayed in her thoughts. She wondered what it would feel like to sit among them, to laugh without fear of judgment. Could she ever do such a thing? The next day, she found herself watching them again. During another recess, she walked past the human quarters and heard their voices from within. They were practicing a small game, throwing a ball of cloth back and forth, cheering each other when they caught it in clever ways. It was a simple thing, almost childish compared to the dignified games of her people. And yet, the joy in their voices was real. Daniel, spotting her once again, tossed the cloth ball high into the air as if performing just for her. He nearly missed the catch, stumbled, and then laughed at himself as the others clapped. Riala's lips curved slightly before she could stop them. The feeling of a smile was strange after so many years, but it came naturally in that moment. She quickly straightened her face and walked away, but the warmth lingered. Later, her chief guard approached her. "Princess, the humans act without dignity. Should I ask them to restrain themselves in your presence?" Riala surprised herself by saying, "No, leave them." Her tone was calm, but inside, she felt a quiet rebellion against the endless rules that shaped her life. That evening, as she prepared for another round of formal talks, she thought about the difference between her world and theirs. Her people measured every word, every step, every gesture. Humans, however, seemed to live as if each moment could be enjoyed without shame. It was not weakness, she realized. It was something else, something that gave them strength. She remembered Daniel's words, "Sometimes tradition makes walls, and if you build walls too high, no one ever reaches the person inside." For the first time, Riala wondered if she had been living inside such a wall for too long. The cracks had begun to show, and through those cracks, the laughter of humans slipped in like light. The peace gathering on Vera Station continued into its third week. On the surface, it looked calm. Delegates discussed treaties, exchanged promises, and signed agreements. But beneath the polished words, old rivalries still burned. Among the most restless were the Zarth, a faction known for their hunger for power. They despised the talks, believing peace would only weaken their influence. To them, the humans were especially irritating. How could such a young race, new to the stars, stand beside the great powers as equals? In quiet corners of the station, whispers of a plan began to spread. A small group of Zarth agents moved like shadows, preparing to strike when the time was right. Their goal was simple: destroy the fragile trust and blame the humans for it. Princess Riala, unaware of the full scheme, sensed something uneasy in the air. She had always been sharp, raised to notice hidden moves behind polite faces. During one late session, she caught a fragment of conversation between two delegates, a strange mention of a spark that will burn the humans. The words lingered in her thoughts. That evening, while walking through the quieter halls of the station, she paused near a side corridor. Voices drifted toward her, low and urgent. "The device is ready," one said in the harsh accent of the Zarth. "It must appear human," another answered. "When the explosion happens, the council will turn on them. No one will trust their kind again." Riala's heart tightened. She pressed herself against the wall, listening carefully. A plan to frame the humans. She understood the danger instantly. If such an attack occurred, it would not only destroy the peace talks, but also endanger the small human delegation, including Daniel. Her first instinct was to call her guards, but she hesitated. The Zarth were powerful, and if she accused them, without proof, it could start open conflict. And if she spoke in defense of humans, her council might question her loyalty. For the first time, Riala felt the heavy weight of choice. Dewey told her to stay silent until she had certainty. But another voice inside her, the one that had begun to awaken after meeting Daniel, urged her to act. She returned to her chambers in silence, her thoughts restless. She could not sleep that night. The stars beyond her window looked cold and distant, as if waiting for her decision. The next day, the humans once again drew her attention. She passed by their quarters and saw Daniel speaking with his companions. They were discussing strategy, but even in serious talk, they found ways to lighten the mood. Daniel made a small joke, and the others laughed softly, tension easing from their faces. Riala paused, hidden in the shadows. A quiet question formed in her heart. If I say nothing, what will happen to them? Later, during the council, she watched the Zarth delegates closely. Their words were smooth, but their eyes were sharp. filled with quiet calculation. She could almost feel the hidden threat beneath their polite tones. When the session ended, Daniel caught her gaze from across the hall. He lifted his hand slightly, not a full wave this time, but a small gesture, as if to ask silently, "Are you all right?" To her own surprise, Riala felt comfort in that simple look. She gave the slightest nod in return. That night, she finally made a choice. She could not reveal everything yet, but she could prepare. She called her most trusted guard into her chamber. "There may be danger," she said softly. "Keep your eyes on the Zarth. If they move strangely, tell me at once." The guard bowed. "As you command, Princess." Still, she knew it was not enough. If the Zarth truly planned to frame the humans, then warning them directly might be the only way to save them. But could she risk such closeness? Speaking privately to a human, especially Daniel, would not go unnoticed. The thought of his playful grin, his fearless greeting, and his words about walls came back to her. Sometimes tradition makes walls. Her life had always been shaped by those walls, yet now, for the first time, she considered stepping through them. The hidden threat grew nearer. The Zarth's plan moved forward in silence, and Princess Riala, once distant and untouchable, stood at the edge of a decision that could change not only her life, but the fate of the peace talks and perhaps the place of humans in the galaxy. The day of the Grand Council meeting arrived. Delegates from every world gathered in the central chamber of Veristation. The room itself was a circle of shining glass and steel, with banners from dozens of species hanging above. It was the most important day of the peace talks, when agreements would finally be sealed. But in the shadows, the Zarth agents moved quietly. Their device was hidden beneath the council platform. Time to release a deadly explosion. Their plan was simple. When the chamber erupted, they would make sure fragments of human technology were found near the wreckage. The humans would be blamed, peace would shatter, and chaos would rise. Princess Riala entered the chamber with her usual grace, her guards at her side. Outwardly she was calm, but inside her thoughts raced. She had overheard enough to know danger was near, but she had no clear proof, and yet her heart told her she could not stay silent. Her eyes searched the chamber until they found Daniel among the small human delegation. He looked almost out of place in the vast hall, yet there was an ease in his manner. When he noticed her gaze, he gave a tiny smile and nodded. Somehow, that simple gesture gave her courage. The council began, speeches were made, promises exchanged, and the chamber filled with the sound of formal voices. But beneath the table where the leaders sat, the Zarth device ticked closer to activation. Riala shifted in her seat, her instincts tightening. She could not ignore the sense of danger. At last, she leaned toward her chief guard and whispered, "Check beneath the platform." Quietly, the guard obeyed, slipping away with careful steps. Moments later, his voice crackled in her ear through the small comm bead. "Princess, there is something here. A device. It is active." Her breath caught. She had been right. "Disarm it," she whispered quickly. There was a pause. Then the guard replied, "I cannot. It is sealed." "We have little time." Riala's heart pounded. If the device exploded, the entire chamber would be destroyed. Hundreds of lives would be lost and the humans would be blamed. She had to act. But the council was still in full session, all eyes on the speakers. Before she could decide, Daniel suddenly noticed her expression. From across the room, he saw the slight tension in her face, the urgency in her eyes. Without hesitation, he slipped from his seat and moved toward her. Ignoring the sharp looks from his fellow humans, he reached her side quickly. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" he whispered. Riala glanced at him, surprised. "You see too much, human." "I've been told that before," Daniel replied with a faint grin, though his eyes were serious. "What is it?" She hesitated, trusting him meant stepping outside her walls completely. But there was no time left. "There's a device beneath the platform," she said softly. "It will explode soon, and they will blame your people." Daniel's eyes widened, but he did not waste time with fear. "Then we need to get everyone out now." Before she could stop him, he stepped forward, raised his voice, and shouted, "Stop the session. There's danger." The hall erupted in confusion. Delegates stood. Guards reached for weapons, and angry voices demanded an explanation. The Zarth agents reacted instantly. One of them rose from his seat, aiming a hidden weapon at Daniel. But before the shot could fire, Riala stood and raised her voice with the authority of her crown. "Guards, protect the humans. There's a device beneath the chamber." Her words carried weight. The guards surged into motion, tackling the Zarth saboteurs and dragging them down. At the same time, Daniel rushed toward the council platform. "What are you doing?" Rial called after him. "Buying us time," he shouted. Back, he reached the platform, dove beneath it, and saw the device, a dark sphere glowing with pulsing light. He had no training in explosives, but he knew enough to see it was seconds from detonation. His hands moved quickly, searching for anything that looked like a release. Wires crossed like veins of light, humming with energy. He pulled one free, sparks flew. The glow slowed for a heartbeat, then quickened again. "Daniel." Riala's voice rang through the chamber. She had left her seat and moved toward him, her guards forming a shield around them both. "I can't stop it," Daniel shouted. "But maybe I can move it." Without waiting, he lifted the device with both hands. It was heavy, burning hot, but he held on. With a desperate cry, he ran toward the wide balcony at the chamber's edge. "Open it," he yelled. Riala raised her hand, and the guards triggered the balcony shield. A gap opened, revealing the cold void of space. Daniel hurled the device through with all his strength. For a moment, silence. Then, outside the station, the device exploded in a sphere of fire and light, harmless in the empty void. The chamber shook, but no one was harmed. The council froze in stunned silence. Smoke curled from the balcony opening, and Daniel stood panting, his hands scorched, his clothes singed but his body alive. Riala moved at his side, her silver eyes wide. For the first time, she did not think of duty or tradition. She simply saw the human who had risked everything to save them all. "You are reckless," she whispered. Daniel grinned weakly. "Maybe. But we're alive, aren't we?" Around them, whispers spread through the chamber. The humans had not been the cause of destruction. They had been the ones to save everyone. And standing beside the distant princess, Daniel looked less like an assistant and more like a hero. Rial's walls cracked further that day. For the first time in her life, she felt something stronger than duty, a quiet respect, and perhaps something more for the playful human who had changed everything. The explosion outside the station was still fresh in everyone's mind. News spread quickly. If Daniel had not acted, the chamber would have been destroyed and hundreds would have died. Many were shocked, some were impressed, but no one could deny what had happened. A human had saved them all. For Princess Riala, the memory of Daniel running with the burning device was burned into her thoughts. She had seen courage before, soldiers, guards, even leaders who stood firm in battle. But this was different. Daniel was not a soldier, not trained to fight or sacrifice. He had acted simply because it was right. That night, after the council was dismissed, Riala sat alone in her private chamber. The silence pressed around her. Normally, such silence gave her peace. But now it felt heavy, almost cold. For years she had told herself distance was strength. Yet today, she realized distance could also mean loneliness. Her hand rested against her chest, remembering the fear she had felt when Daniel lifted the device. Fear not just for the council or for peace, but for him. That thought unsettled her. More than the explosion itself, a soft chime sounded at her door. Her guard entered and bowed. "Princess, the human Daniel requests to see you." Her first instinct was to refuse. No human, no outsider, had ever entered her private chamber. But then she paused. For so long, she had been untouchable, unreachable. And yet, hadn't he already broken that wall by speaking to her so boldly? After a moment, she said, "Let him in." Daniel stepped inside carefully, his hands bandaged from the burns, his uniform slightly torn. Yet he smiled as if nothing troubled him. "Evening, Princess," he said lightly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Riala studied him in silence. "You should be resting." she said at last. Your injuries are not light. He shrugged. I've had worse. Besides, I thought I should thank you. If you hadn't spoken up, no one would have listened when I shouted about the danger. Her eyes softened. No, Daniel, it is I who must thank you. You saved us all. You saved me. He waved a hand as if brushing aside the weight of her words. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly. Not anyone. Many would have waited, or hesitated. But you acted. You risked yourself without thought of reward. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then, quietly, Riala added, Why? Daniel blinked. Why what? Why risk your life for strangers? For me? She asked. Her voice lower than before. You could have stayed back. No one would have blamed you. He looked at her, his expression softer now, because that's what humans do. We don't always think of titles or walls or who is important. We see someone in danger, and we try to help. That's all. Riala lowered her gaze. His words were simple, yet they struck deep. She thought of her own people, of endless rules and distance. She thought of herself, untouchable for so long. Then she looked back at him. You confuse me, human, she said honestly. All my life, I have been taught to guard myself, to stay above others, to never let them too close. And then you, she stopped, her words faltering. Daniel smiled gently. And then I waved and called you a cute girl. Despite herself, Riala's lips curved. It was small, but it was real. Her guards, standing silently at the door, looked stunned. Never in their memory had they seen their princess smile so openly. You are impossible, she said, shaking her head. Maybe, Daniel replied, his grin widening. But at least I got you to smile. That's worth something. For a long moment, they stood facing each other. Riala felt something shift inside her. The wall she had carried for so many years, the wall built of duty, tradition, and fear was cracking. And through that crack, warmth flowed in. Finally, she said, You should return to your people. They will worry. He gave a small bow, though it was more playful than formal. As you command, Princess, but if you ever get tired of being distant, you know where to find us. We'll probably be laughing too loud down the corridor. Riala shook her head softly, but her smile lingered even after he left. For the first time, her chamber did not feel so cold. The next day, during the council, she acted differently. When Daniel entered the hall with the human delegation, she greeted him not with silence, but with a nod that carried recognition. Others noticed, and whispers began to spread. The distant princess was no longer so distant. And as the peace talks continued, more and more eyes turned toward the humans not as weak newcomers, but as a people whose spirit could change even the most untouchable of hearts. The explosion outside the station was still fresh in everyone's mind. News spread quickly. If Daniel had not acted, the chamber would have been destroyed and hundreds would have died. Many were shocked, some were impressed, but no one could deny what had happened. A human had saved them all. For Princess Riala, the memory of Daniel running with the burning device was burned into her thoughts. She had seen courage before soldiers, guards, even leaders who stood firm in battle. But this was different. Daniel was not a soldier, not trained to fight or sacrifice. He had acted simply because it was right. That night, after the council was dismissed, Riala sat alone in her private chamber. The silence pressed around her, normally. Such silence gave her peace. But now it felt heavy, almost cold. For years she had told herself distance was strength. Yet today, she realized distance could also mean loneliness. Her hand rested against her chest, remembering the fear she had felt when Daniel lifted the device. Fear not just for the council or for peace, but for him. That thought unsettled her. More than the explosion itself, a soft chime sounded at her door. Her guard entered and bowed. Princess, the human Daniel requests to see you. Her first instinct was to refuse. No human, no outsider, had ever entered her private chamber. But then she paused. For so long, she had been untouchable, unreachable. And yet, hadn't he already broken that wall by speaking to her so boldly? After a moment, she said, Let him in. Daniel stepped inside carefully, his hands bandaged from the burns, his uniform slightly torn. Yet he smiled as if nothing troubled him. "Evening, Princess," he said lightly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Riala studied him in silence. "You should be resting," she said at last. "Your injuries are not light." He shrugged. "I've had worse. Besides, I thought I should thank you. If you hadn't spoken up, no one would have listened when I shouted about the danger." Her eyes softened. "No, Daniel, it is I who must thank you. You saved us all. You saved me." He waved a hand as if brushing aside the weight of her words. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly. "Not anyone. Many would have waited, or hesitated. But you acted. You risked yourself without thought of reward." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then, quietly, Riala added, "Why?" Daniel blinked. "Why what? Why risk your life for strangers? For me?" she asked, her voice lower than before. "You could have stayed back. No one would have blamed you." He looked at her, his expression softer now, because that's what humans do. We don't always think of titles or walls or who is important. We see someone in danger, and we try to help. That's all. Riala lowered her gaze. His words were simple, yet they struck deep. She thought of her own people, of endless rules and distance. She thought of herself, untouchable for so long. Then she looked back at him. "You confuse me, human," she said honestly. "All my life, I have been taught to guard myself, to stay above others, to never let them too close. And then you—" She stopped, her words faltering. Daniel smiled gently. "And then I waved and called you a cute girl." Despite herself, Riala's lips curved. It was small, but it was real. Her guards, standing silently at the door, looked stunned. Never in their memory had they seen their princess smile so openly. "You are impossible," she said, shaking her head. "Maybe," Daniel replied, his grin widening. "But at least I got you to smile. That's worth something." For a long moment, they stood facing each other. Riala felt something shift inside her. The wall she had carried for so many years, the wall built of duty, tradition, and fear, was cracking. And through that crack, warmth flowed in. Finally, she said, "You should return to your people. They will worry." He gave a small bow, though it was more playful than formal. "As you command, Princess, but if you ever get tired of being distant, you know where to find us. We'll probably be laughing too loud down the corridor." Riala shook her head softly, but her smile lingered even after he left. For the first time, her chamber did not feel so cold. The next day, during the council, she acted differently. When Daniel entered the hall with the human delegation, she greeted him not with silence, but with a nod that carried recognition. Others noticed, and whispers began to spread. The distant princess was no longer so distant. And as the peace talks continued, more and more eyes turned toward the humans, not as weak newcomers, but as a people whose spirit could change even the most untouchable of hearts.